guys, Ruth here from Beltane Gifts and welcome to the crafting shares. Today I am going to take you through how to make this little guy who is a tiny little robin, and he's needle felted. He takes about 40 minutes to make, and if you add just a little hanging tag, he is perfect for hanging onto the Christmas tree or to give it as a gift tag on presents. So what you're going to need is one of these, which is a rice filled bag for felting on, and a fine felting needle. I've got mine in a wooden handle here, which I find makes it a lot easier to felt with over a long period of time. You're also going to need some different wool fibres to work with. For the body, I'm going to be using some of this, which is just a natural grey wool fibre that I've just messed up so it's nice and fluffy. You need kind of like a handful's worth. Remember to always use less fibre than you actually need, because you can always add more later. And I'm also putting on some of these, which are leather finger protectors. I found that these are the best things to keep your fingers safe while stabbing. So ball up your fibre to start off with. We want to get it quite close together, which means you need to do less stabbing. Don't squish it too much, just pinch it very lightly and just stab straight down between your fingers. Be careful not to stab your fingers at this point. What we're going to do is just keep stabbing, rotating the fibre until we can create kind of a rounded shape. Now you'll notice in the top right corner I've got some pictures of robins. These are what I'm using as my template, and these are the shapes that we're aiming for. So we want our ball of grey fibre to look the same as the whole shape of the robin there. So it's kind of like a teardrop from beneath, or egg shape almost, with a ball on top for the head. Now if you see, I've fast forwarded this, just stabbing over the whole thing just to bring everything together so that all the fibres are pulling on each other. It gives you a nice smooth finish. Once you've got a soft ball, if you give it a squish, you should see that it's very squidgy. So I'm just going to give that a squish and show you. So very squidgy, this ball. If you felt too fast and end up with it being too dense, you can't shape it later. So once you've got that, we're going to just do the head first. So I'm going to do a small circle first, just to outline where the head is going to be. And this is going to be the back of the neck where I'm stabbing now, round in kind of like an oval shape. There we go, and you can see how that leaves just kind of a bulbous section, and the robin is starting to take shape already there. Now I'm just going to work around just so that that head area really sticks out. You may find you need to go backwards and forwards over the same area just until you see a real difference in the levels. So notice here how it's really starting to go down there and really define that area. Once you've got the head defined, you can start working backwards from there to bring in the sides to create the point at the tail. So notice I'm working from the head area there, working my way back towards the bottom so that I can create that point shape. Now again, you'll need to go over the whole area, bring everything down. You'll see I'm stabbing quite deeply with the needle at the moment because I'm trying to shape it. Just fast forwarding again. Once you've got the basic shape, you can stab just a little bit lighter, just to flatten everything down to the same level. Now what we want to do is create that point, so I'm going towards the bottom, towards that point, working in the same direction, and what that does is it pushes the fibres from the head end down towards the bottom end. And I'm redefining now the head and the body. Just go over it, lighter strokes again, not stabbing as deeply, just to smooth off, flatten all the areas, just to really even out the shape. And what we want to do is we want to get a much firmer shape to work on, because we're going to be adding colours to it. So you'll notice how it's getting smaller and smaller, and that's because I'm going over and over, just flattening everything down, bringing it in whilst maintaining that shape. So if you have a look now, just compare that shape to the picture I've got on the right hand side. Now it is a lot squishier still than it's going to end up, but we can go over it again and again once we've added the other colours. Now this is going to be our wing and back of the head colour. So again, starting with a big ball of the fibre, I've pulled it apart, I've made it really messy. Now the messier your fibre is, the smoother it's going to look when it's done. It's strange that that works, but it does. Now I'm going to start off from the top of the head and work my way backwards. Now with this, because we're trying to get that shape around the forehead and going back under the wings, what we do is we're going to outline that first. So I'm starting at the point of the head, working my way backwards, and then working my way along underneath the line of the wing to the tail. Once you've got the outside all secured, you can then go over the whole thing and stab it into place. If you didn't do it this way, what you'd find is you'd end up with gaps where the fibre just gets pulled tight and you'd be able to see the grey through it. We don't want that. You can cover it up later if that happens, but it's much easier if you just cover it all in one go like this. So I've just popped it on here. It's done quite lightly, don't worry about that. We're going to go over it to shape it later. Now we're going to be adding the red for the face and the breast. So we're starting off again. We're going to go around the outline of the face first. So if you hold your fibre with your covered thumb so that you don't stab yourself, and just stab it against the edge of the brown. Now you want to get the two meeting up, otherwise you're going to see the grey. So stab as close as you can whilst maintaining that almost heart-like shape around the eyes. Now again, I'm just doing that outside edge first. Once that's secure, you just stab lightly over the whole thing to bring that fibre in and to smooth it out and to completely cover the face and breast of the robin. Go, so we're just covering over everything here, working our way around. If there's areas that seem to be sticking out more than others, focus on those with your stabbing, and again, when you're stabbing over, you just do it a lot lighter. Okay, and now you'll find that some of the brown will have been moved and different areas will have been moved, so we're going to go over the whole thing again and just stab anything that's sticking out more than it should. And we're going to add now the detail to the wings. So we're going to start with a line starting about a third down the back from the top of the head and just working in a straight line. Now to do this, we're using long deep strokes with the needle, and we're not using just the point. We've got the needle at an angle, so we're using the side of the needle to really catch those fibres, really define that line. If you need to, go over it repeatedly just until you've got a really well defined line like I have there on the back of the bird. Once we've got this, we can start adding the top of the wings as well. So we're going to do that in a slight curve, just going from the side of the wing into the middle. And again, deep strokes with your needle. The deeper you stab, the more defined it's going to be, and we're going to work our way all the way around just so that you can really see that line where the wing is supposed to be. Now we're just going to do the feathers, so again, more lines as you did with the central parting. We're going to do the wings here and just really define. We're just going to do 2 lines, and that gives us 3 feathers. I found with the robin being this size, if you do more, it really just loses a lot of the detail. So we're just going to do 2 lines and then just go round that edge, and what I'm doing is I'm stabbing up towards the brown and I'm catching some of the grey fibre and I'm stabbing it up and under the brown of the wing, and what that does is it really makes the wings stand out more, and it just, if you see there, so there's a real definition between the grey part of the body and the brown of the wing, and it makes the wings look separate to the body. Now you don't have to do that step if you didn't want to, but personally I find that that really just gives that 3D feeling to the bird. There we go, so we've done 1 wing there. If you want to, you can do little feathers further up, just little notches here. I'm doing that by just doing little curved lines just from the points where I've done the lines of the wings. I'm just joining those up using little curved lines, and that just makes it look like you've got 3 more feathers just further up the wing. Once you've completed that and you've really defined them, you're happy with them, you can swap over and start felting the other wing. There we go, so it's exactly the same process, just done on the other side. Again, just doing those little curves and the lines for the feathers. Now you may need to go over these again later because you'll be holding the bird and sometimes that can cause loose fibres. Don't worry, you can keep going until you're happy. You don't need to copy exactly what I'm doing in the video. Okay, and just going over the top of the head again, just to make sure that that's nice and defined now that we've stabbed below. And what we need to do for the face is to add a beak. Now I'm using some really dark fibre, only a little bit, again messing it up just a tiny bit. What I'd recommend is using a little bit less than you think you need, because you can always add more later if you need to. roll it between your palms to create a ball. That just starts the felting process and keeps everything together for you whilst you're stabbing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stab in the middle just to secure it, just a few stabs just to make sure it stays in place. Don't stab it too much because you'll lose all your fibre. Once you've got that, we're going to do the two sides of the beak, and we're just going to stab the fibre just to secure it where we want the left and the right side of the beak to be, and then we're going to curve it round and just stab the other side. And what we're going to want is a point at the top of the beak, so like the bridge of the nose if it was a person, and underneath the beak we're just doing a curved line. Now notice how I'm stabbing from different angles. What you want to do is always be stabbing towards the centre of the beak. So if you were stabbing from the top, you'd be stabbing down towards the centre of the beak. From the left you'd be stabbing inwards, and that way you push all the fibre forward and towards the point of the beak, which is where we want it to be. If you stabbed from the same direction all the way round, what would happen is that you'd be pushing the fibre out from different areas and you'd end up flattening it. We don't want it flat, we want it nice and pointy. So always remember to stab up towards that centre point of the beak where you want all the fibre to end up as a point. There we go. And you want to work your way around the outside and make sure it's really nice and secure before you start shaping too much, otherwise you'll find that everything will just shift. There we go. I'm just catching some of those loose fibres just around the outside edge, just stabbing up towards the centre of the beak. Notice there's some fluffiness towards the bottom, just catching that now and pushing it up. And just keep working your way around until you're happy with that shape. As I said, you can always add more fibre if you want to. You can have a bigger beak. If you prefer it smaller, you can make a smaller one. I quite like with these robins that they each seem to have their own character because everyone is slightly different, and because of the placement of the beak and the eyes, they all have their own different personalities, which I love. Okay, so again, just working from a different angle there, just towards the point of the beak. So you're working from the base towards the tip of the beak, just to really get that point in. Now, you might find that your beak is slightly off centre. If so, and you're not happy with that, you can always just use your finger and thumb just to pinch and just to move the beak ever so slightly to where you want it. Here mine's slightly to the left, so what I'm actually doing is pulling it to the right and then stabbing the side of the face just to bring it in slightly, just to centre that beak for me. You don't have to do that, as you say, because you can have just more character the other way, but I quite enjoy doing that. Now this is for the tail. So for the tail, I'm using the same colour brown as we did for the wings. You need a small section, it's about 8 centimetres long. What I'm doing is I'm just stabbing it into the cushion using the needle, just to keep it in place because we're going to be flattening this. Now fold over your fibre and just stab all over, leaving right on the ends just so that they're fluffy still. We'll be using those to attach. So we're just going to be stabbing a couple of centimetres worth, and if you notice I'm just pulling everything in into a bit of a diagonal there. Now peel off your cushion, you'll find some bits might stick, so you can just pull those off. Turn it over and fold in one of the sides just a little bit and stab over that to flatten it. Then turned it over and pulled in the other side and stabbed over. Now I'm turning over again. The important thing here is to make sure it's evenly felted throughout. So keep stabbing it over, all over the surface, trying to get it as flat as you can. We want it to be really nice and flat and together so it doesn't come apart. You'll notice the more it's getting felted, the less fibres will be getting stuck to your cushion. Now I'm taking it between finger and thumb and I'm pinching very tightly. You really do need your finger protectors for this. And what I'm doing is stabbing just between finger and thumb and just catching the edge, right along the edge of the fibre. What this does is it catches those loose fibres, tucks them in, and notice how smart the edges are now. Now you really need to pinch tightly to do that, and you just slide the needle between finger and thumb. Now to do this section here, what I'm doing is just adding two lines to create the impression of 3 feathers. And we do this exactly the same way as we did the line down the back of the robin. Now just use the long edge of the needle just to catch as many of the fibres as you can, and don't forget to turn it over and just stab in any loose pieces. If you wanted to, you could add the tail before you added the wings, and I probably would recommend doing that. I just got a little bit carried away and didn't. So what I'm doing now is just attaching the tail by stabbing in on either edge right at the base of where the wings meet the grey underbody, and I'm just going over that edge and stabbing really deeply just to really attach it as strongly as I can before felting in these loose edges. Now notice I'm catching the fibre with my needle and I'm pushing it in. Don't hold your fibre too tight. If you do, you won't have any loose fibre to stab in it. It just won't catch. So leave your fibre loose and just stab over it, catching those loose fibres, really stabbing them in to the body of the bird, and this will make sure that your tail is really secure. A trick here is to follow along the line of the feather that you did earlier. This way you have a nice smooth line that you've already defined that you can follow along, and all you have to do then is just stab down the centre as well, and you're redefining those feathers you created earlier. It's a good way to hide where you've added the extra fibre. Now this is why we left the fibre loose and didn't felt it, because it's much easier when it hasn't already been felted to just smooth it into our previous wings and back that we created. So now once you've got those lines really well defined, you can just lightly go over the centre bit that's still fluffy, just to flatten it down and to smooth it. And by now, because of all the deep stabbing that you've done along the lines of the feathers and the back, it's already really well secured, so you don't need to stab quite as deeply at this point. You can still keep that fullness in the feathers. Okay, so just speeding up, just going over again, really trying to flatten in that extra fibre and redefine those feathers. Again, if you had put the tail on first, you wouldn't have to do this point. Okay, so feathers are attached, the tail is attached, it's time to do the eyes. Now I'm using 3mm plastic beads. These are perfect size for these tiny little birds, and I've got a very fine needle and thread. This is actually a beading needle that I'm using. So if you stab up from the grey section of your bird up through into the spot where you want the eye to be, I haven't put a knot in this cotton. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull it so that the end is inside the body, and I'm just going to do a tiny little stitch and pull it tight. Now this is going to hold your thread, and it saves you having to get rid of the knotted piece that would be on the outside of the bird. So all your ends are going to be inside your robin. Just thread your beads. If this is going to be around children, what I would recommend is that you do several stitches just to make sure that the eye is really secure. Now sew through from one side to the other. Again, try and get it centered so that your eye is going to be exactly where you want it. Add it onto your needle, and then again, if it was for children or near animals, definitely do several stitches just to make sure it's secure. This one isn't going to be, so what I'm going to do is sew straight back through as close to the line where the chest is and the grey is, so where the red and grey meet. And I'm going to do a couple of stitches here, again as close as I can make it to the red and the grey, and then I'm going to sew back through and cut off. If you wanted to, you could keep the long length of thread, sew back through and just leave a hanging loop here so that it could be hung on a tree. For me, I'm just going to keep it as is. Now what we're going to do is where those little stitches were, we're just going to take the felter needle and just pull the red over the top so that the chest covers the stitches that I've just made, and you can go over that and just make sure it's nice and neat. Any extra stabbing that you need to do that now. Otherwise this is complete and ready to go. You can give it as a gift just as is, or you can add a hanging tag. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my other felting videos, and I hope to see you soon.